What if I told you that even in the midst of a struggling economy, one of the biggest growth products out there are gluten-free foods? Over the past 15 years, the gluten-free market has experienced an annual growth rate of over 20%, meaning the industry has grown almost twice as fast as the Nasdaq. To give you an idea of how huge that is, in 2007, the gluten-free industry accounted for about $700 million. By 2027, it's projected to reach $17 billion, and that's a growth rate of nearly 10% per year for the next 6 years. But it wasn't that long ago that gluten-free staple foods were basically non-existent. Many alternatives to basic food items like bread and pasta simply weren't available. In fact, according to one patient who suffered from celiac disease, searching for food products took careful label reading and calling the 1-800 number off a food product and then reading the barcode to the manufacturer to get the answer regarding the gluten content. So, how exactly do we go from reading off barcodes to manufacturers in a supermarket in the hopes that you might get an answer, to iPhone apps that do all of that for you instantaneously, and entire sections of the grocery store dedicated to gluten-free foods and other alternatives? Now, you could argue that there has been a general increase in the case of food allergies and intolerances. And while that is certainly true, only about 7% of the American population is more or less required to avoid gluten for medical reasons. And while that is certainly a decent number, I'm not sure it quite explains the explosion in both access and options of gluten-free alternatives. Because the market is projected to nearly double in a decade, and a lot of that growth is coming from places like restaurants and hotels. Not to mention that the fastest growing segment of the market can actually be found in one of the least likely products you could imagine: baked goods. Bakery goods alone are expected to account for well over half of the entire gluten-free market by 2027. In short, gluten-free is starting to become commercialized on a scale never seen before. But why is that? Clearly, for a food revolution of this size, there had to be some sort of legislative effort by our government, or maybe a special committee to direct producers to meet the need in such a short period of time. Yeah, that isn't what happened at all. Because while 7% of the population may have serious medical reasons to eat gluten-free foods, many others have simply chosen that. That's right, the explosion you are seeing is not a result of some central planning by a government entity, but is a result of hundreds of farmers, truckers, ship captains, scientists, nutritionists, grocery store owners, restaurateurs, bakers, and many more identifying a demand and adjusting production and the allocation of resources in order to meet it. And they didn't necessarily set out to help people with celiac disease or gluten intolerances, rather to provide for their own families. But the marketplace created an environment where hundreds and thousands in several different industries across multiple continents could best help their families by helping those with a relatively rare disease have better access to healthy food alternatives. And that's the beauty of the marketplace. It incentivizes people all over the world to work together in order to accomplish a goal, in order to provide for themselves and for others.